Ambassador Zekthor stood before the massive viewing screen in the council chamber, his blue-scaled hands clasped behind his back. The holographic display showed a simple star map with one area marked in angry red warnings. That area was the Sol System, home to a species called humans. "This is foolish," Zekthar said to the assembled council members. "We fear shadows and old stories." Elder Counselor Mexana, her ancient form hunched over a floating chair, shook her head slowly. Her species, the Veltar, were among the oldest in the galaxy. They remembered things others had forgotten. "Young Ambassador," she wheezed, "those warnings exist for good reason. My ancestors placed them there 50,000 years ago." Zekthar turned to face her, his yellow eyes bright with confidence. 50,000 years, Elder. Think about what that means. Any species locked away for that long would be primitive. They'd probably still use chemical rockets. The council chamber buzzed with quiet conversations. Representatives from dozens of species filled the floating seats that circled the room. Some nodded in agreement with Zekthar. Others looked worried. "The energy readings," said Science Director Holmby, pulling up new data on the display. "We detected massive power signatures from their star system 3 months ago. The numbers don't make sense." Zekthar waved a dismissive hand. "Probably their sun having solar flares. Or maybe they learned to split atoms." Primitive species always think they're advanced when they discover nuclear power. Elder Maxana's eyes grew darker. "Ambassador, you do not understand. The warnings speak of fear," Zekthar interrupted. "Fear from a time when our ancestors were young and scared of everything they didn't understand. We are the hegemony now. We control half the galaxy. We have weapons that can crack planets and shields that can stop stars from exploding. What could one isolated species possibly do to us?" The chamber fell silent. Many council members had been thinking the same thing. The hegemony had grown strong over the millennia. They had faced down warrior races, defeated machine empires, and brought peace to thousands of worlds. Surely one quarantined species posed no real threat. "The archaeological evidence," said historian Verthek, reading from his datapad, "suggests humans were contained because of excessive aggression toward other sapient species and incompatible social development patterns. They sound like typical barbarians." Zekthar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Exactly. Barbarians who were locked away before they could develop proper technology. While we built star cities and learned to fold space, they've been sitting on their little worlds playing with fire and sharp sticks." But Elder Maxana was not finished. She activated her personal display, showing ancient texts covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "The oldest warnings do not call them barbarians," she said quietly. "They call them the first children and those who came before. They speak of a great sorrow and a willing exile. These are not the words used for defeated enemies." "Mythology," Zekthar scoffed. "Every species has creation myths about being first or special. The reality is simple. We found a dangerous species. We contained them. And now we need to decide what to do about these power readings." Defense Minister Culver, a massive being covered in natural armor plating, leaned forward in his seat. "If they've developed dangerous weapons, we should act quickly. Better to deal with them while they're still contained." "My thoughts exactly," Zekthar agreed. "I propose we send a reconnaissance force. Not to attack, but to investigate and make contact. If they're truly primitive, we can bring them into the galactic community properly. If they're developing forbidden weapons, we can handle the situation before it becomes a problem." The debate continued for hours. Some council members supported immediate action. Others urged caution. A few, mostly from the older species, suggested leaving the humans alone entirely. Finally, Supreme Chancellor Vortek called for order. His species, the mighty Kovani, had led the hegemony for over 10,000 years. "The motion before us is clear," he announced in his deep voice. "Ambassador Zekthar proposes sending a military reconnaissance force to investigate the human species and determine if they pose a threat to galactic stability." Elder Mexana struggled to her feet. "Supreme Chancellor, I urge you to vote against this motion. The warnings exist for reasons we have forgotten, but that does not make them less important." Zekthar stood as well. "Supreme Chancellor, we cannot allow fear of the unknown to paralyze us. If humans have developed dangerous technology, every day we wait makes the problem worse. If they are primitive, then we are wasting time and resources maintaining a quarantine that serves no purpose." The vote was close, but fear of unknown weapons ultimately outweighed respect for ancient warnings. The motion passed by a narrow margin. Within days, Admiral Kethfer was assembling the largest reconnaissance force in hegemony history. 200 ships, including 50 heavy cruisers and 10 massive dreadnoughts. It was enough firepower to conquer most star systems. "Excessive force?" Admiral Kethfer asked when some questioned the fleet's size. "Appropriate caution," Zekthar replied. "We don't know what we'll find there. Better to be prepared for anything." As the fleet prepared to depart, reports came in from long-range sensors. The energy readings from the Sol system were growing stronger. Whatever the humans were doing, they were doing more of it. "See?" Zekthar told anyone who would listen. "They're building something. Probably weapons. We need to move quickly." Elder Mexana made one final plea before the fleet departed. She requested a private meeting with Admiral Kethfer and Ambassador Zekthar. "Admiral," she said, her voice weak with age, "if you must go, please remember that sometimes the strongest action is restraint. If you encounter anything unexpected, anything at all, retreat immediately." Admiral Kethfer, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, nodded respectfully. "Of course, Elder. We're not looking for a fight." "And Ambassador," Mexana continued, turning her ancient eyes to Zekthar, "pride is the luxury of those who have never faced a superior force. Do not let your confidence blind you to danger." Zekthar barely contained his irritation. "Elder, with respect, we are the superior force. 200 ships against one isolated system. What could possibly go wrong?" 3 days later, the fleet entered hyperspace, heading for the Sol system. They expected to find a primitive species with dangerous toys. They had no idea they were about to discover why some doors should never be opened, and why some warnings should never be ignored behind them. Elder Mexana watched the stars and whispered prayers in languages older than most civilizations. She prayed that her fears were wrong. She prayed that the ancient warnings were just superstition. Deep down, she knew they were not. Admiral Kethfer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, watching as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Around him, 200 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the dark metal that had conquered a dozen star systems. "Sensors. Report," the Admiral commanded. "Sir," came the nervous voice of Lieutenant Pexler. "I'm getting readings I don't understand." Admiral Kethfer frowned. His sensor officer was one of the best in the fleet. "Explain." "There's a barrier around the entire system, sir. It appears to be energy, but not like anything in our databases. It's perfectly spherical and extends from the outer planets to well beyond the asteroid belt." Ambassador Zekthar, who had insisted on joining the mission, moved closer to the main display. "Show me." The screen lit up with an image that made several crew members gasp. A shimmering wall of blue-white energy surrounded the human star system like a soap bubble. But this was no natural phenomenon. Geometric patterns flowed across its surface, and massive structures were embedded within it at regular intervals. "What are those structures?" Admiral Kethfer asked. "Unknown, sir. They're large. Some appear to be the size of moons." Zekthar stared at the display, his confidence wavering for the first time. This must be some kind of natural barrier. Maybe their star produces unusual radiation. "Sir," said the communications officer, "I'm detecting artificial signals coming from multiple points within the barrier. They know we're here." Before anyone could respond, every screen on every ship in the fleet suddenly displayed the same image: a human face. The being looked remarkably similar to several galactic species, with 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. But there was something in those eyes that made veteran soldiers shift uncomfortably. "Attention, unknown vessels," the human said in perfect galactic standard. "This is Director Sarah Chun of the Seoul Defense Network. You have entered restricted space." Admiral Kethfer stepped forward. "This is Admiral Kethfer of the Galactic Hegemony. We come in peace, seeking dialogue with your species. We wish to establish formal contact according to galactic protocols." Director Chun's expression didn't change. "Admiral, your fleet is comprised of 200 military vessels carrying enough firepower to sterilize most inhabited worlds. This does not suggest peaceful intentions." "We came prepared for any situation," Zekthar interjected, pushing into view of the communication system. "We didn't know what to expect from a species that has been isolated for 50,000 years. Something flickered in Director Chun's eyes. 50,000 years. Is that how long you think we've been here? Our records indicate your species was quarantined due to excessive aggression, Admiral Kethfer said diplomatically. We're here to evaluate whether that quarantine is still necessary. Director Chun was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and that smile made the Admiral's blood run cold. I see. You believe you placed us here. The Galactic Hegemony has maintained this quarantine zone since. Admiral, Director Chun interrupted gently. You have exactly 60 seconds to reverse course and leave this system. This is your only warning. Zekthar pushed forward angrily. You're threatening us? We have 200 ships. You're one isolated species that's been cut off from galactic civilization for 59 seconds. Director Chun said calmly. This is ridiculous, Admiral Kethfer said. We're trying to establish peaceful contact. Why are you being hostile? 58 seconds. The Admiral looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at their instruments with growing confusion. Sir, whispered Lieutenant Pexler, our sensors can't penetrate that barrier at all. We have no idea what's on the other side. 57 seconds. And sir, added the weapons officer, something is scanning us. Our shields are useless against it. Whatever they're using is going right through our defenses like they don't exist. 56 seconds. Zekthar slammed his hand on the communication console. Stop this countdown. We are representatives of the Galactic Hegemony. We control half the known galaxy. You will treat us with respect. Director Chun's image flickered, and for just a moment, the crew of the Eternal Glory saw something impossible. The human's form seemed to shift and flow, as if she existed in more dimensions than the three they could perceive. Her voice, when it came, seemed to come from inside their heads. You control half of a very small galaxy, Ambassador, and you understand so very little of what you're dealing with. 55 seconds. Admiral Kethfer had fought in 17 major battles. He had stared down warrior races and machine empires. But something about this calm human counting down from 60 was terrifying him more than any enemy fleet. What happens when you reach 0? He asked quietly. I activate our defensive systems. And then? Then you discover why your ancestors were wise enough to leave us alone. Sir, The sensor officer called out urgently. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout their system. The power levels are... I can't even measure them properly. 50 seconds. This is insane, Zekthar muttered. One system against 200 ships. Director Chun seemed to hear him despite the distance. Ambassador, may I ask you something? When you look at our star, what do you see? The Admiral glanced at his tactical display. I see a standard G-type star, relatively young, nothing unusual. Look closer. Lieutenant Pexlor adjusted the sensors and focused on the human sun. The readings that came back made him stagger. Sir, that's not a star. I mean, it is, but there are structures around it. Massive structures. They're harvesting the entire energy output. 45 seconds. Admiral Kethfer felt sweat beading on his forehead. Director Chen, surely we can discuss this reasonably. If you have advanced technology, the galaxy could benefit from... Admiral. She interrupted. Do you know why we were really quarantined? Our records say excessive aggression. Your records are incomplete. We were quarantined because we were advancing too quickly. Because our presence was preventing younger species from developing naturally. Because every time we tried to help, we accidentally stunted the growth of civilizations that needed to find their own way. 40 seconds. The quarantine was our idea, Admiral. We imposed it on ourselves. To give you time to grow. Zekthar's face had gone pale. That's impossible. 35 seconds. We've been watching you develop, Director Chun continued, hoping you would grow wise as well as strong. But you haven't, have you? You've grown powerful enough to threaten our isolation, but not wise enough to respect it. Sir, whispered the communications officer, I'm detecting other signals now. There are voices talking in languages that predate galactic civilization. Some of them are speaking dialects that shouldn't exist anymore. 30 seconds. Admiral Kethfer made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. All ships, prepare to withdraw. Begin reverse course immediately. Admiral, Zekthar protested. We can't retreat from one system. Think about what this will do to hegemony prestige. 25 seconds. Ambassador, the Admiral said quietly, I've been in enough battles to recognize when I'm outmatched. We're leaving. No, Zekthar said firmly. I'm overriding your command as senior diplomatic authority. Fleet, advance into the system. Call their bluff. Director Chun's countdown stopped. I'm sorry you made that choice, she said softly. Last thing Admiral Kethfer saw before everything changed was Director Chun's expression shifting from calm to infinitely sad. Then reality itself seemed to bend around them, and he learned exactly what 50,000 years of undisturbed development could accomplish. The moment Ambassador Zekthar gave the order to advance, reality broke. Admiral Kethfer watched in horror as 3 of his largest dreadnoughts simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not exploded, not reduced to debris. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if the universe had decided they had never been built. Sensors, he barked, his voice cracking with panic. What happened to the undaunted, the victorious, and the iron will? Lieutenant Pexlor was frantically working his controls, sweat dripping onto his console. Sir, I can't find any trace of them. They're not on sensors. They're not in our communication logs. The computer says they were never part of our fleet. That's impossible, Zekthar whispered, staring at the tactical display where 3 massive warships had simply vanished. Ships don't just disappear. Sir, called the quantum computing specialist, her voice high with fear. Our quantum cores are crashing. They're trying to process what just happened, and they can't. The math doesn't work. According to our instruments, those ships never existed. Admiral Kethfer grabbed the nearest support rail as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. All around him, instruments were sparking and displays were flickering. The eternal glory, pride of the hegemony fleet, was shaking apart just from trying to understand what it had witnessed. Then the communication system crackled to life again. But this time, the voice was different, older, tired. When it spoke, it used words and phrases that predated galactic civilization by millennia. "Children of the void," the voice said in ancient Veltar, a language that shouldn't have existed anymore. "You know not what you do." Elder Counselor Mexana had taught Admiral Kethfer that language when he was young, as part of his cultural education. He had never expected to hear it spoken by anyone other than historians. The voice switched to other ancient languages, one after another, each older than the last. Finally, it settled on Galactic Standard, but with an accent that made the Admiral's skin crawl. "We are older than your concept of age," the voice continued. "We were ancient when your ancestors first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone." A new image appeared on their screens. Not Director Chen this time, but something that might once have been human. The being was tall and thin, with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Its eyes held depths that spoke of eons beyond counting. "I am called the Wanderer," it said. "I was among the first to volunteer for the Long Watch. That was 47,000 of your years ago." Zekthar found his voice. "You're lying. No species could live that long." The Wanderer smiled sadly. "Death is a choice we made optional long ago, Ambassador. Like so many things you still consider laws of nature." "Sir," Lieutenant Pexler whispered urgently, "I'm detecting movement inside their barrier. Massive ships, but they're not following normal physics. Some of them appear to be moving through solid matter." Admiral Kethfer looked at the sensor readings and felt his world crumble. The shapes moving within the Sol system were enormous beyond comprehension. Some appeared to be the size of planets. Others seemed to exist in folded space, larger inside than outside. "What are you?" he asked quietly. The Wanderer's image flickered, and for a moment the Admiral saw the truth. The being wasn't speaking from a ship or a planet. It was floating in space itself, breathing vacuum as easily as air. Its body partially phased into dimensions the Admiral couldn't even perceive. "We are what you might have become, given enough time and wisdom," the Wanderer replied. "We are what your species could still become, if you learn to choose growth over conquest." "The quarantine," Admiral Kethfer said, understanding beginning to dawn. "You weren't contained. You contained yourselves." "Correct. We realized that our presence was stunting the development of younger species. Every time we tried to help, we accidentally prevented necessary struggles. Every time we shared our knowledge, we robbed others of the joy of discovery." Zekthar was shaking his head violently. No, this is impossible. The hegemony has records. We defeated you. We locked you away." The Wanderer's laugh was like wind through ancient trees. "Ambassador, your oldest records date back 12,000 years. Our youngest citizens are older than your entire civilization." The communications officer suddenly looked up from her station. "Sir, I'm receiving data streams from across the galaxy. Other species are responding to what just happened here. Some of them are fleeing." "Fleeing?" Admiral Kethfer asked. "The oldest species, sir. The ones that still remember. They're abandoning their worlds and heading for the galactic rim." The Wanderer nodded. "The wise ones remember. They know what it means when humans begin to stir." "What does it mean?" the Admiral asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "It means the time of protected development is ending. For 50,000 years, we have honored the agreement our ancestors made with the first galactic civilization. We would remain in isolation, allowing younger species to grow without our interference. In return, they would respect our boundaries and never force us to reveal ourselves. The sensor readings were becoming more impossible by the moment. Lieutenant Paxlar was openly weeping as his instruments tried to process what they were detecting. "Sir, there are structures in their system that exist in 11 dimensions. There are ships that are traveling faster than light without using hyperspace. There are energy signatures that suggest they're converting matter directly into pure thought. You have broken the ancient pact," the Wanderer continued. "Your arrogance has shattered 50 millennia of careful balance." Zekthar finally seemed to understand the magnitude of what was happening. "We didn't know," he whispered. "The records, they said you were primitive, dangerous." "The records were written by those who feared the truth," the Wanderer replied. "It is easier to believe you defeated a threat than to accept you were protected by mercy." Admiral Kethver made a decision that would save what remained of his fleet. "All ships, immediate withdrawal. Emergency hyperspace jump, maximum distance." "Sir," called the navigation officer, "our hyperspace drives aren't responding. Something is interfering with our ability to fold space." The Wanderer's voice became gentle, almost paternal. "You will be allowed to leave, Admiral. But first, you must understand what you have awakened." The barrier around the Sol system began to change. Sections became transparent, revealing the truth that lay within. What the fleet saw there would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives. Cities that floated in space without visible support, each one larger than most moons. Beings of pure energy dancing between the stars. Ships that seemed to be grown rather than built, their hulls alive and pulsing. And around the Earth's sun, a structure so vast it could only be seen in pieces, harvesting the star's entire output and converting it into forms of energy that had no names in galactic science. "This is what we have become during our exile," the Wanderer explained. "We have learned to exist partially outside normal space-time. We have merged biology with technology so completely that the distinction no longer has meaning. We have built a civilization that spans dimensions you cannot perceive. Why are you showing us this?" Admiral Kethver asked. "Because the isolation ends now. Your attack, misguided though it was, has broken the ancient agreement. We are no longer bound to remain hidden." The communications officer looked up with wide eyes. "Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from the Hegemony Council. They're ordering us to hold position and wait for reinforcements." The Wanderer heard this and shook his head sadly. "They still don't understand." "Admiral," came Director Chun's voice, joining the transmission. "Your people are brave, but they are also very young. Please explain to them that we do not wish to harm anyone, but we will no longer hide what we are." Admiral Kethver found himself speaking words he never thought he would say. "Director Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Hegemony, I formally request permission to withdraw our forces and report back to our leaders." "Permission granted," she replied. "But Admiral, when you report back, please make something very clear to your council." "What's that?" "The quarantine is lifted. Not because we have changed, but because you have proven you are ready to face the consequences of your actions. Humanity returns to the galaxy tomorrow." As hyperspace capabilities suddenly returned to his ships, Admiral Kethver gave the order to retreat. The last thing his sensors detected was massive structures beginning to emerge from the Sol system, moving toward the galactic core. Behind them, the Wanderer watched their departure with ancient eyes full of sadness. After 50,000 years of isolation, humanity was about to rejoin a galaxy that had forgotten why they had left in the first place. The age of protected innocence was over. The journey back to Hegemony space felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Admiral Kethver sat in his ready room, staring at data that shouldn't exist, trying to write a report that no one would believe. His surviving ships limped through hyperspace, their quantum computers still crashing every few hours as they tried to process what they had witnessed. 3 ships had been erased from existence so completely that their crews couldn't even remember serving alongside them. The fleet's official records showed they had departed with 197 vessels, not 200. Lieutenant Paxler knocked on the Admiral's door. "Sir, you need to see the latest sensor analysis." Admiral Kethver looked up from his impossible report. His sensor officer had aged years in the past few days, his scales dulled with stress. "What now, Lieutenant?" "The data fragments we captured from inside the human barrier, sir. Our computers have finally processed enough to give us a partial picture of what we saw." The lieutenant activated a holographic display that filled the room. What appeared was a three-dimensional map of human space, but the scale made no sense. "This can't be right," the Admiral said. "Show me the scale indicators." "Sir, the scale is correct. These structures inside their system, some of them are the size of gas giants. And they're not empty. Our scans detected massive populations living inside them." The hologram zoomed in on one structure, a vast cylinder rotating slowly in space. "This single habitat appears to house over 1 billion beings, sir. And it's just one of hundreds." Admiral Kethver stared at the display. "How many humans are there?" "Based on these fragments, sir, conservative estimate would be several trillion. But that's just in normal space. Some of these readings suggest populations existing in parallel dimensions." The Admiral's blood ran cold. "Parallel dimensions?" "Sir, they're not just using the space in their system. They're using the space between spaces. They've built their civilization across multiple layers of reality." Another knock came at the door. Communications Officer Velanara entered, her face pale with fear. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The oldest species are evacuating entire star systems." "Show me." The holographic display shifted to show a galactic map with red warning signals scattered across it. Ancient species that had been silent for millennia were broadcasting emergency evacuation orders. "The eternal scholars of Vorthik VII have abandoned their homeworld," Velanara reported. "They left behind a single message: the inheritors wake. The young races must now face what they have wrought." "The inheritors?" "It seems to be what some of the older species call humans, sir." Admiral Kethver felt a chill run down his spine. "Continue." "The deep dwellers have collapsed their space cities and fled beyond the galactic rim. The Timeless Collective has sent out warnings in languages we can barely translate. All of them are saying the same thing: the protection is ending." The Admiral activated his personal communication system and contacted Ambassador Zekthar, who was aboard another ship in the fleet. "Ambassador, we need to discuss what we're going to tell the Council." Zekthar appeared on screen, and the Admiral was shocked by his appearance. The confident ambassador who had pushed for this mission was gone. In his place was a broken being who jumped at shadows. "They knew our language," Zekthar whispered. "All of them. Languages that died out before the hegemony was even formed." "How do they know dead languages?" "Ambassador, focus. What do we tell the Council?" "The truth," Zekthar said quietly, "that we have awakened something that should have been left alone." But when they arrived at hegemony space, the Admiral discovered that the truth was the one thing the Council refused to accept. Supreme Chancellor Vordak stood before the emergency session, his massive form radiating anger. "You're telling me that 100 experienced officers and 2 advanced AI systems all suffered the same delusion simultaneously?" "Sir, it wasn't a delusion," Admiral Kethver insisted. "We have censored data. You have corrupted data from malfunctioning equipment," interrupted Defense Minister Culver. "The idea that humans are some ancient superspecies is ridiculous." Elder Counselor Mexana, who had warned against the mission, spoke from her floating chair. "Chancellor, the Admiral's report matches records from before the hegemony was founded. Records you have chosen to classify as mythology. Because they are mythology. Chancellor Vortex slammed his fist on the podium. We cannot run the galaxy based on ancient superstitions. Ambassador Zekthar stepped forward, his voice hollow. Sir, I saw beings that existed partially outside normal space. I watched ships disappear without any trace they had ever existed. This isn't superstition. The Chancellor was about to respond when every communication system in the chamber activated simultaneously. The face of Director Sarah Chun appeared on screens throughout the council building. Council members of the Galactic Hegemony, she said calmly. I thought you should know that we have begun the process of ending our isolation. The chamber erupted in shouts and arguments. But Director Chun's voice cut through the chaos with impossible clarity. Over the past 50,000 years, we have watched you civilizations grow and develop. We have seen you make the same mistakes we once made, face the same challenges we once faced. We hoped you would learn wisdom along with power. Chancellor Vortex stepped toward the screen. Human, you will explain yourself immediately. By what right do you threaten the Galactic Order? Director Chun's expression didn't change. Chancellor, we threaten nothing. We are simply returning to a galaxy we left long ago for your benefit. Our benefit? Defense Minister Culver growled. We don't need protection from primitives. Minister, Director Chen replied gently. Your species didn't exist the last time humans walked freely among the stars. The chamber fell silent. What are you saying? Chancellor Vortex asked quietly. I'm saying that most of the species in this room evolved long after we entered voluntary exile. We are not returning conquerors, Chancellor. We are returning elders who have been away too long. Impossible, whispered Science Director Holmby. Our evolutionary records show. Your records show what we allowed you to discover, Director Chun interrupted. We have been very careful not to leave evidence that might interfere with your natural development. Admiral Kethfer found his voice. The Wanderer called us children of the void. He said you were ancient when our ancestors first looked at the stars. The Wanderer speaks truly, Director Chun confirmed. We achieved sapience in this galaxy approximately 2 million years ago. We reached the stars when most of your homeworlds were still cooling from their formation. Elder Counselor Mexenzia's ancient voice cracked as she spoke. The old records. The warnings about the first children. They were about you. Yes, Elder. Your species, the Veltar, were among the first we encountered when we began exploring. You were just developing agriculture then. We watched you grow, guided you gently, and eventually realized that our guidance was preventing you from reaching your full potential. So you left, Mexana whispered. We imposed exile upon ourselves. We retreated to our birth system and sealed it away, allowing you and others to grow without our shadow falling across your development. Chancellor Vordek's voice was barely audible. And now? Now you have broken the ancient agreement by attempting to breach our isolation. The exile is ended, not by our choice, but by yours. The screens around the chamber shifted, showing images that made council members cry out in terror. Vast structures were emerging from the Sol system, moving through space at impossible speeds. Ships that looked more like living creatures than machines were heading toward the galactic core. These vessels contain our diplomats and observers, Director Chun explained. They will establish embassies on major worlds and resume our place in galactic affairs. You can't just decide to take over. Defense Minister Culver protested weakly. Minister, we're not taking over anything. We're simply ending a 50,000-year period of self-imposed isolation. The galaxy will have to adjust to the fact that humanity was never gone. We were just waiting for you to grow up. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside, across the galaxy, ancient species continued their exodus to the rim. They remembered what younger civilizations had forgotten. that sometimes the greatest mercy is for the powerful to remove themselves from the equation. But mercy, once rejected, is rarely offered twice. The first human ship arrived at the galactic capital 3 days later. Admiral Ketfer stood on the observation deck of the Hegemony Defense Station, watching something that defied every law of physics he had ever learned. The vessel approaching them wasn't flying through space. It was reshaping space around itself as it moved. "Sir," Lieutenant Pexler said quietly, "our sensors can't get a proper reading on it. The ship appears to be growing as it gets closer." The Admiral nodded grimly. He had seen enough impossible things in the past week to stop being surprised. "How large is it now?" "Approximately 15 kilometers long, sir. But the strange thing is, it was only 5 kilometers when we first detected it. It's like the ship is unfolding itself from folded space." Through the massive viewing windows, they watched the human vessel take shape. It looked organic, like some vast spaceborne creature made of metal and energy. Its hull pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to communicate in languages beyond words. Ambassador Zekthor joined them at the window, his face hollow with defeat. "The Council is still trying to mobilize a defense fleet," he said quietly. "Against that?" Admiral Ketfer gestured at the approaching ship. "We couldn't scratch their barrier with 200 vessels. What makes them think 1,000 ships will fare better?" "Pride," Zekthor replied. "The same pride that got us into this situation." The communication systems throughout the station activated, and Director Sarah Chun's voice reached every corner of the massive structure. "Hegemony Defense Station, this is the diplomatic vessel Eternal Journey. We request permission to dock and establish formal relations." Chancellor Vortok's voice crackled through the station speakers. "Human vessel, you will maintain your current position while we decide how to respond to your presence." There was a pause. Then a different voice spoke, older, sadder, with the weight of eons behind it. The Admiral recognized it as the Wanderer. "Chancellor, with respect, we are not asking permission. We are informing you of our intentions as a courtesy. You will follow hegemony protocols," Chancellor Vortok demanded. "Chancellor," the Wanderer replied gently, "the hegemony has existed for 12,000 years. We've been civilized for 2 million. Your protocols are irrelevant." The human ship continued its approach, and Admiral Ketfer realized that no force in the galaxy could stop it. The vessel moved through their defensive grids as if they didn't exist, its hull rippling with energy that absorbed their most powerful weapons without any apparent effect. "All stations, hold fire," the Admiral commanded. "Do not engage the human vessel." "Admiral," came Chancellor Vortok's angry voice. "I did not authorize." "Sir," the Admiral interrupted, "I have seen what they can do. If we attack that ship, they will erase this entire station from existence. Stand down." The human vessel reached the docking bays, but instead of using the standard ports, it simply merged with the station's hull. Metal flowed like water, creating a perfect seal that shouldn't have been possible. "Sir," Lieutenant Pexler whispered, "our hull integrity is actually stronger now than it was before they attached." An hour later, Admiral Ketfer found himself in the main conference room, sitting across from beings that had once been human but were now something far more. Director Chun looked relatively normal, though there was something about her that suggested she existed in more dimensions than the standard 3. The Wanderer was clearly no longer bound by purely physical form. His body shifted and flowed like liquid light, but it was the third being that truly shook the Admiral. It introduced itself simply as the Architect, and it was enormous, not in physical size, but in presence. Looking at it was like staring into a vast intelligence that spanned star systems. "Admiral Ketfer," Director Chun said kindly, "we want you to understand that we hold no ill will toward your people. Your attack on our borders was misguided, but it was not malicious. "Then why are you here?" the Admiral asked. The Wanderer answered, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in the Admiral's bones. "Because the agreement that kept us isolated has been broken. We can no longer pretend that younger species are developing in a vacuum." "What agreement?" Ambassador Zekthar asked. The architect's vast intelligence focused on him, and Zekthar nearly fainted from the contact. When it spoke, its words came from everywhere at once. 2 million years ago, we were much like you are now. Young, aggressive, proud of our accomplishments. We conquered systems, imposed our will on other species, believed that might made right. What changed? Admiral Kethfer asked. "We met something older than ourselves," Director Chun replied. "The species that had been waiting for us to mature for over 10 million years. They taught us the hardest lesson any sapient species can learn, which is that true power lies in restraint. That the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, not dominate them. That wisdom matters more than strength." The Wanderer gestured, and the air in front of them shimmered, showing images of ancient history. "They showed us what we would become if we continued on our path of conquest. We saw ourselves growing in power but diminishing in wisdom, until we were nothing but cosmic bullies destroying everything we touched." "So you stopped?" Zekthar asked. "We evolved," the architect corrected. "We learned to merge biology with technology, to exist partially outside normal space-time, to build with thoughts as much as matter. But most importantly, we learned compassion." Director Chun leaned forward. "When we encountered younger species, we realized our presence was stunting their growth. Every time we helped, we robbed them of the chance to develop their own solutions. Every time we intervened, we prevented them from reaching their true potential." "So you left," Admiral Kethfer said, understanding finally dawning. "We retreated to our birth system and sealed ourselves away," the Wanderer confirmed. "We established monitoring stations throughout the galaxy to watch over developing species. But we swore never to interfere directly. Until now," Zekthar whispered. "Until you forced our hand," Director Chen said sadly. "Your attack on our borders was an act of aggression that broke the ancient compact. We can no longer pretend to be extinct." The architect's presence grew heavier. "The protection phase of galactic development is now ending. Younger species must face the universe without our hidden guidance." "What does that mean for us?" Admiral Kethfer asked. "It means the galaxy is about to become a much more dangerous place," the Wanderer replied. "There are things lurking in the dark between stars, Admiral. Ancient evils that we have been quietly holding at bay for millennia. With our return to open activity, they will know that the time of protected innocence has ended." Director Chun activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy in ways the Admiral had never seen. Dark areas pulsed with malevolent energy, held back by barriers of light that led directly to human space. "We have been fighting a shadow war for 50,000 years, she explained. "Protecting younger species from threats they don't even know exist. But our return to galactic society means we can no longer fight that war in secret." "You're saying there are hostile forces out there?" Zekthar asked, his voice shaking. "Forces that make your worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams," the architect confirmed. "They have been waiting for the humans to drop their guard. Now they know that time has come." Admiral Kethfer felt the weight of galactic history settling on his shoulders. "What do we do?" "You grow up," Director Chun said simply. "Quickly. The age of childhood is over, Admiral. Humanity is returning to take its place as the galaxy's elder species. The question is whether the younger civilizations are ready to stand beside us as equals, or if they will insist on remaining children forever." Outside the conference room, Admiral Kethfer could hear the sounds of the human ship continuing to merge with the station. More ships were arriving from across the galaxy, as humanity emerged from 50,000 years of self-imposed exile. The galaxy was about to learn that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again, and that some protectors, once awakened, would reshape everything they touched. The age of human isolation was over. The age of reckoning had begun. As Admiral Kethver looked out at the stars, he realized that his species, the younger species, were about to discover what it truly meant to live in a universe where humanity was no longer content to watch from the shadows. The children of the galaxy were about to meet their parents, and they were going to learn that growing up was far more terrifying than they had ever imagined.